Alright folks, today I'm going to be working on something that, I don't know, maybe somebody's a little bit curious about. I know I was, and now that I've done the research and found it out, I've also found that there's not really a whole lot of videos about it. I'm working on this 83 El Camino today, which, as you know, anybody knows almost anyway that follows cars or is interesting. This is the G-body platform, so this includes El Caminos, Malibus, Olds Cutlasses, Monte Carlos, Pontiac Grand Prix, Buick Regals, Grand Nationals, so on, so forth. That they are all G-body platforms. But anyway, what I'm doing today is doing a manual steering swap on this car. I'm sure many of you will wonder why in the world would you do that or whatever. And I pretty much I don't have any real good reason to do it. The old power steering stuff was all leaky and really worn out, so I took it off and I got some junkyard parts, and so yeah, it's one of those things I just kind of wanted to do it. And I know a lot of you might think that sounds stupid, but whatever, I don't care. Anyway, I've already got the power steering pump and the belt, obviously, and the old power steering box off. There's a few things that go into doing the swap that are necessary, and I'll go over those in this video. There's a couple of things that I've done that are not 100% necessary, but I believe will make the whole thing a lot better, so I'll go over that as well. Okay, here's a couple of things that you need for this swap. First off, of course, is a manual steering box, obviously. This one right here came out of a mid to late 80s model Chevy S10. There's a couple of different styles of these boxes. This one right here is the 4-bolt cover style. I don't know exactly what the model name is on these. In later model G-bodies, it pretty much looks just like your power steering box, except it doesn't have the, the power steering lines right in this neighborhood over here. Otherwise, it basically looks just like it. Has the same dimensions, the splines are all the same, and all that jazz. If these are actually getting really hard to find. I was surprised when I found this. I wasn't actually looking for one of these, and I found it on accident and bought it. You can use the older 3-bolt cover style, which I'm pretty sure is actually a Saginaw 525 box. If that's not what it is, you can use a Saginaw 525. The problem that you run into on that is the output shaft right here. On this one, you can reuse your original Pitman arm on it, as long as you had the 4-bolt cover power steering box, which is a Saginaw 800 series power steering. If you use the Saginaw 525 box or a 505 or whatever, the Pitman arm, the hole is too big to fit on those older shafts. However, if you have an older model G-body, like a late 70s, I think up until 1981 or 2, and you've got one that's got the old Saginaw 605 power steering box that doesn't have this type cover. It's got like a round cover with a snap ring that holds it in. If you have one of those, the Pitman arm will work off one of those on a 525. But otherwise, pretty much 82 and onward. You got to have the S10 box if you plan on using the original Pitman arm, or using the S10 Pitman arm. In this case, I took the original Pitman arm off the original box and cleaned it up and stuff. I could use either one, but I'm going to use the original one because it's the one that I cleaned up and painted. So, but you could go either way with that in this case. So yeah, just a couple of things to keep in mind. Like I said, if you find the older S10 box that has the 3-bolt hole covers, your original power steering Pitman arm is not going to work unless you have the old 605 power steering box, which most G-bodies, I'm pretty sure, do not have. So yeah, that's pretty much the most essential parts we've got going here. The steering shaft is out of a Chevy Astro van. I had to knock this end off, this U-joint off, and clock it 90 degrees. So whenever I put it in and the steering wheel is straight, the wheels will also be straight. Otherwise, you can bolt them in just like they are, but when the wheels are straight, the steering wheel is going to be cocked 90 degrees. So the center bar of the steering wheel will be up and down instead of across. So that's why that's necessary. But it was well worth the work because it didn't take long to do it. It wasn't incredibly difficult to do. And it got rid of the rag joint and like the CV type joint at the other end and replaced those both with U joints. So yeah. S10 steering box, Astrovan steering shaft, and I've got some new tie rod ends in the house, so here we go. Let's get started. Okay, I've got some new tie rod ends and a new center drag link whipped up here. I've got the steering box up here with my original Pitman arm off from the Saginaw 800 series power steering box, because like I said before, it will actually fit the S10 box. If you've got the older 3-bolt hole style, that thing's covered in mud because I dropped it on the ground, my bad. But anyway, if you've got the old 3-bolt hole style power steering, or manual box rather, this Pitman arm won't work. You'll have to get one for an earlier G-body that has the 605 power steering box, because it's got a smaller 1-inch diameter hole in the Pitman arm for the shaft. This is actually a 1 1/8, I think. 1 1/16 or 1 1/8, one of the two. I don't remember. Either way, it's bigger. But since I've got the later manual box, my original Pitman arm worked just fine. I could have used the original S10 Pitman arm even, but this is the one that I had that's all good and cleaned up, so that's what's getting used. It's literally 3 bolt holes. There's one. Well, you can see actually all of them right here. Actually, I know how to get a better shot of it. There's 2. Well, there's all 3 of them right there in the shot. So literally stick the power steering box, or I keep saying power steering box, stick the steering box in there and put the bolts in it, and that's as simple as that as far as putting the steering box on. So yeah, I'll be back with you in just a minute. Okay, so the steering box is bolted into the car. It's all tightened down. Didn't have to drill any holes, didn't have to do anything fancy. This thing literally bolts into the place of the original power steering box. So a couple things about it. I made sure to turn this thing from lock to lock before I put it on here, and got it as close to the center as I could between lock to lock. If you see right here where my thumb is, there's a flat spot on that shaft. So that means the steering coupler can only go on one way, and so it should line right up with that when I get ready to put it on, in conjunction with that being lined up. The only other modification I'm going to have to do using that Astrovan steering shaft, this has a hole through the center of it to hold the original steering shaft on here. The Astrovan shaft, it clamps on here and has a pinch bolt down at the bottom. And so I'll have to file a little clearance spot about right there, roughly, so the pinch bolt can go through. But not a big deal, shouldn't take me just a minute to do it. The steering shaft will be in, and so what I'm going to go ahead and do right now is start putting my new tie rod ends and stuff in, and this should be done in 20 minutes. Okay, so I've got the tie rod ends and stuff in. Probably kind of hard to see, it's getting a little dark out here. But I got the new center drag link in, got the tie rods in, got it all hooked up. I've literally just got to put the steering shaft in this thing, and this baby will be ready for a test drive. And then I'm sure it'll be ready for some major alignment at the same time. So we're on the home stretch here. All right, folks, it's been a few days actually since I last did some video footage on this whole manual steering swap. It ended up getting dark on me the day that I was doing it, and then the weather was kind of bad for a couple of days, and so on and so forth. But the nice thing about it was I actually finished it that day, and then about 2 days later I actually managed to go ahead and take this car and get an alignment job done. So here is the manual steering setup after it's all said and done and finished. This is, yet again, like I discussed before, this is a manual steering box out of a mid to late 80s model Chevy S10. I reused the original to the car Pitman arm, even though I could have used the S10 Pitman arm. And then, of course, this steering shaft here is out of an Astro van, a 95 through 05 Astro van. And the top U-joint up here, I had to flatten out the peening on it and pull it off and clock it over 90 degrees, and I put it back on there and just kind of spot welded it. It's kind of ugly, but whatever, it'll work. It's not coming off of there. And you know, like I've talked about it, you know, in other segments of the video, but I'll just go over it again real quick. The reason you need to clock those 90 degrees is if you don't, and of course the wheels are turned so the steering wheel's not going to be straight, but if you don't clock that U-joint 90 degrees up there, whenever the wheels are straight, the crossbar of the steering wheel will be up and down. So your steering wheel will be clocked off 90 degrees. And some people, I guess, might not care about that, but I cannot imagine that being my day-to-day life. That would drive me nuts. But anyway, you can see I've been driving the car. It's already dirty under here and stuff. It's rained a lot and this and that. But I took this thing and had it in alignment, and not only did they do a toe alignment, but they also redid the camber and caster alignment. You can see that they've changed some of the shims around and stuff. They went all out and actually did a pretty good job. The car actually drives better than I figured it would, especially considering it's got junkyard parts and just in general how crusty the car itself is. So yeah, that's pretty much just a quick rundown of what it looks like in here. Got rid of that belt and the pump. It's clean, you know, nice, clean, no fancy anything hanging out here. And like I said, I didn't have a real specific reason to do this. Just the old stuff was leaking, and I thought it would be kind of interesting just to do it. You know, I don't plan on getting rid of this car or anything, and if I ever get tired of the manual steering, I've still got all the power steering stuff that I can clean up and replace some seals in or whatever and just slap it right back in here. So yeah, I'm going to set the camera up in the car and we'll go for a little ride. All right, we're gonna take this thing for a little test drive. I know I've got the camera kind of like really canted over there at a weird angle, but I'm really hoping that that'll help keep it still. This thing hasn't been started a day or two, but it should fire right up. Let's see what happens. One pump of the gas. Ah, yeah. There we go. It's actually, well, generally, since I've been driving this thing, I've noticed that it really doesn't much matter how warm or cold it is. It usually fires right up. But yeah, let it run for a second. I'll pat the gas again so the choke will open up and we'll take off. And of course, like a lot of these old cars, the gear shifter is pretty sloppy, and well, everything's pretty sloppy in it. This car's honestly pretty crusty, but you know, whatever. I practically got it for free. For safety, folks. This one certainly isn't as easy to steer as what the power steering was, but it's really not bad at all. A little old lady with arthritis could drive this thing if you wanted to. cut many a donuts in the snow in this parking lot. Don't tell anybody. Shady spot. Yeah, right here, dude. I decided to reposition the camera a little bit where it's not quite as cockeyed, and I put something in the seat to weigh the tripod down, so let's see how this goes. And also I've got the window rolled down because even though it's November, it's a little warm today. It's funny, I just got to thinking, if any of you guys have ever seen some of my older videos of the 63 Impala that I used to have, driving this car now with manual steering reminds me a lot of driving that old Impala, except this car handles like 1,000 times better than that Impala did. But it also probably weighs about 800 pounds less than that Impala and has quite a bit stiffer suspension than the Impala. But the steering reminds me a lot of the Impala. And wow, they didn't even know.
we go.